welcome to the Two Real Cinema Club. I'm James Rosica.
And I'm Andres Lorette. And on the Two Real Cinema Club, every couple of weeks, we watch a couple of films, usually one old and new, and we draw some comparisons and some contrasts between the two.
Compare and contrast, yeah, like a good exam question.
Yes. And this week we're looking at 2023's Reality, which is on HBO in the States, in the UK. Where?
No, I'm confused. So it's on. So it has a theatrical release in the UK, and it's on. Is it so? I thought it used to be HBO Max, and now it's just Max or HBO.
I know, and I as soon as I said HBO, I said HBO doesn't exist anymore.
So it's not. So it's impossible to see this film now.
I saw it on Max, which is a new, completely unrelated to HBO venture.
Right, which is like what they're saying, that Pepsi Max is completely unrejelated to
Pepsi Zero or Coke Zero. They're all
right. Okay, to Coke, it's not completely unrelated to Coke.
Same vat of crap, I think, in the soda world. And we're looking at also. I saw it on DVD. Is that 1975?
I think it is. Let me check my notes.
3 Days of the Condor.
Yes.
A big 70s film with Robert Redford and Faye Dunaway.
I was thinking we should call this podcast Reality Bites. Just too easy. Before we talk about the films, we'll quickly do the socials. As always, you can find us on Twitter at Two Real Cine Club. At Twitter, we're on Instagram, Two Real Cinema Club. At Instagram, you can read our blog at tworealcinemaclub.com, and you can email us. We would love to read your emails, be they kind or abusive, at tworealcinemaclub@gmail.com. Let us know what you think. That's the address to use if you want to tell us your opinion, ask us questions, offer a sponsorship, or start the formal complaints procedure. And if you can, leave us a review. If you can find the time and energy, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Give us the appropriate number of stars, whatever number you feel is right for you.
Does iHeartRadio have stars or hearts?
That's a good point. Maybe they should have little dials or something, because I think it's the radio part rather than the heart part, which seems to be like the important bit of the sentence.
I've never heard of it. So
right, apparently they own more local like radio stations, like FM and AM stations, than any other single company in the United States.
Really? Ooh.
Yeah, which makes it sound like we're on FM radio, and I don't think we are.
I've always wanted to be on FM. I'd take AM at this point, but boy, FM would be awesome.
I'm now going to have that Steely Dan song on my brain for the rest of the evening. No static at all.
No static. So good. So good.
So, first movie of the pairing is Reality. So, as you say, this is a release this year. This film had its debut this year at Berlin, I think in February, something like that. Made a bit of a splash at the festival. It was picked up by HBO Films, who've presumably renamed themselves just Films recently. So it's being distributed in the US by Max, ex-HBO Max. It's got a theatrical release in the UK, so you can see it in cinemas here. It's directed by Tina Satter. It's her debut film. She comes from a New York theatre background. It is a screenplay by Satter and James Paul Dallas, but this is one of the things we've got to talk about, because does this film have a screenplay at all? This film is based very closely on real transcripts of a real interview. Mm-hmm. So, has it been written? Are we kind of watching a sort of documentary? Let me start out by telling you the story. Let me tell you the story. Should I tell you the story?
Yeah, it goes like this. And then the music comes in. I've heard that. I've heard that on this podcast.
I can tell you're waiting with your hi-hat right now. You ready? Hit the hi-hat. So this film is based very closely on the transcripts of real interviews conducted between its main characters. It's June 2017. It's Augusta, Georgia, and Reality winner, a young NSA Pashto and Farsi translator. I got to ask you, translator or translator? You say translator, wouldn't you?
Yes, translator.
Where I feel like I should be saying translator, but then I feel like I'm hamming up a kind of an English accent that no one ever uses. So I apologise in advance if I keep flipping how I pronounce that.
Try interpreter.
Oh, yes, there we go.
Maybe.
But she kind of isn't an interpreter, is she? It's like she wants to be an interpreter, but currently she's just a translator.
Okay.
Anyway, whatever she does, she arrives home in her little white car with her groceries to find two men waiting for her. They quickly identify themselves as FBI. And they tell her they have a warrant to search her home and her car. And the rest of the film, kind of plays out in real time. And eventually, as the film plays out, they tell her that they are investigating the leak of classified documents. And using a mixture of persuasion and threats, they get reality to tell them what she knows. But what has she done, and what's going to happen? So, I'm going to kick off by saying I did really enjoy this film. It's short, doesn't outstay its welcome. It kept me gripped, but does it have a script? So the film is, the film is a play, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's absolutely a play. It's like it's literally a play because it was adapted from a play.
Yep.
The play is called "Is This a Room?" And it's an example of something I didn't know anything about until I read it for this week's episode. It's an example of verbatim theatre. So it uses the text of this publicly available transcript of Reality Winner's actual FBI interview.
Yeah.
And just turn that straight into a play. And the play was, and the film are set in, pretty much one location, a small number of characters. It's performed in real time. I mean, this is a play, isn't it? It's a play, and it's a play that almost doesn't really have a script. Should we even be covering this film?
Yes, I think so, because it breaks some rules, or it's at least very innovative, and I think we should call it a film, and it is a film. And they even sort of lead you in, or Tina Hatter leads you in. At one point, I think you're actually listening to the actual recording, the actual FBI recording.
Yeah, I think
in the very beginning.
I mean, I assume that is that the actual recorder, or is that like a reenaction of the actual recording? I mean, I don't know. I don't know whether the recording itself is public domain or whether it's just the transcript.
The voices sounded different from the actors' voices, and I think it's just to sort of lead us in. It's really quite clever that you hear a couple of lines from, I think, one of the investigators and Reality early on, and that sort of tells us that they are more or less going verbatim. I love that idea of verbatim theater. I'd never heard of that before, so that's new to me also. So I think there is a script in the sense that there's direction there. You can definitely feel how the characters are directed. So I think, in terms of them moving around the house and all that, that has to be written, I suspect. And but it's very much based on an interrogation, which actually it's just intuitively, innately dramatic. That's why I think it was. I really enjoyed the film, and I think in part because it's just a very dramatic conversation.
It is dramatic, though I'm still going to kind of raise a question mark about how much the writer has to do. I mean, clearly there's some editing that's happened, and there are some choices that have been exercised, but there hasn't been a great deal of work for the writer to do. It's been an editing rather than a creating.
Well, if the writer's strike goes on, we got to get used to this. And
it's either that or it's ChatGPT, isn't it? It's one of those two. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, my little note here, which is that the thing about verbatim theatre is that in real life, the dialogue is usually very realistic.
Yeah.
But in real life, the structure is generally sloppy. And I think this is kind of true for this film insofar as it's. I did a little calculation in my notebook. It's 82 minutes, and that means that it's 7,290 feet of 35mm film. If we use the French classification, it's short and it's skillfully made. I feel very sure of that. But I do think, for all that I was gripped by it, there's probably only just enough story for about an hour's worth of film. So they stuck to this form as a kind of creative exercise, and they've produced something very interesting at the end of it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have written off the idea of exploring around the story.
Yeah.
So we don't get background, we don't get some friends, apart from there's a little recorded call to Reality's sister during the end credits, which again, I wasn't sure whether that was done by actors or whether that was done by the real people.
Yeah.
So, they've decided that they're not going to allow themselves to develop. It's basically just like we have a silent reconstruction of those events that happen outside the interview. But otherwise, they've kind of painted themselves into a corner as far as their creative options go with this. Once you've made this decision, you can't embellish.
Yeah, that was very intriguing to me that it does work without a whole lot of manipulation from the writer. I think I'd read somewhere when we were looking at these films that the actual encounter was closer to 2 hours. So they probably have cut some things out. I think it's like addition through subtraction. I loved the length. We just talked about films under 90 minutes. This thing whizzes by. It's easy to follow, even though it's has lots of spy material and intelligence material and all that. It's still pretty simple to follow. And if anything, maybe she took some things out, which made it stronger. Because you're right. I mean, normally we would think of just everyday dialogue as being uncinematic somehow, but then when you sit down and try and write dialogue, it's really hard to write real dialogue. So I never questioned, this is terrible dialogue or this is really badly written dialogue, because it's very real and it hits perfectly. It's exactly the way that moment played out. So I really enjoyed that aspect. But I think, if anything, it's probably shorter than the actual arrest and search of the home was. But still, in an hour and 23 minutes definitely makes a feature film. We learned that for the French, it could be 40 minutes and be a feature film.
40 minutes, yeah absolutely. Right, let's ring the spoiler bell, because there are, for all that I've complained that not a huge amount doesn't happen, there is some stuff that happens, and there's some stuff that we shouldn't spoil. So let me wheel it out. Wait a second.
Fair enough.
Wait a second. Okay, here it is. Right. Okay, right. So you ready? Cover your ears.
Yeah.
I moved it too close to the microphone there. I'm sorry, that was too loud.
The FBI definitely heard that.
Everyone in my street heard that. So, okay, spoiler bell. We're going to spoil the film from here on. I did find this film gripping, just as we've said, and I didn't know anything going in. I don't know whether you did. This wasn't really a story that was big in the UK news, so I wasn't particularly aware of it before seeing the film. I didn't know what Reality had done, and so, I believed her initial assertions of innocence at the start of the film, and I think you are meant to. And when it turns out that she probably has done what she was accused of, it did make me feel a little bit kind of dizzy and swimmy in just the way that the main character does.
Yeah.
There is one turn in the film, isn't there? There is one twist, which is, you kind of believe that she's, hasn't really done anything bad, and then it emerges, they know everything that she's done, and she kind of comes clean, and everything, spirals a little bit out of control from that moment. And I think it's played terrifically. I think it's a great moment. It's a great turn. It really works. Does it work if you are aware of the story from the actual news?
Yes, I think so, because I had to be reminded of a lot of what happened here. So I had read about the original story, heard podcasts and radio things about it. I had never really seen a documentary or anything like that. But I think because you're getting into the weeds of it, how it actually happened, and it really just focuses very little on her actually taking documents or revealing the documents. It really focuses just on the interaction between principally two of the FBI agents and Reality in her home. So it's really just about that part of the process. It's not about the whole story of what she did or there's not a lot of backstory about who she was beforehand. So I think it really does work on that level of really focusing on just that moment. And it's a real theater trick, really, because no one's going out, leaving and coming back or anything like that. It's three people sort of trapped in a space. So I think it really does work. And as I said, I didn't know a lot going into it. I was reminded of a lot of things. And I think for that reason, you would have to really know the story to be bored by the film, I think. And I don't think there's anyone that's in that camp, really. And especially because it wasn't a dramatic story beforehand. It's been made dramatic by the release of the film and probably the performances of the play.
I mean, there are some great performances here, aren't there?
Fantastic,
I mean, Sydney
yeah.
Sweeney, not an actor that I knew, but I think she's just terrific. She is really believable.
Yeah.
I did read some background. Apparently, she did speak to the real reality winner on Zoom, I think, to try and get her mannerisms and the rhythm of her speech down.
Yeah.
The way that she comes across, she really feels like a real character.
Yeah.
Like she's tremendously believable because she's so contradictory. I mean, this has been like a little note in my screenwriter's notebook. Contradictions, I think, are a vital part of believable characters. She is solid and she is kind of wavering. She is kind of flighty and shifty, but she's also committed. She has, all these kind of contradictions to make her feel, real. I've written my notebook here. Contradictions make people instead of archetypes.
Yeah.
And keep the story interesting.
Yeah.
But the film is kind of, ostensibly there is, a plot about government security. And a lot of the film does feel like it's sort of alluding to a discussion on the rights of women and the attitudes that women might have to endure in the workplace. Because she's really physically dominated by these two men in a closed room.
Yeah.
I kind of came away. I watched it kind of with Rachel, and we haven't spoken about this aspect of the story. Actually, we probably should do. I came away feeling that this is the kind of situation that is probably familiar to many women in the workplace.
Yeah.
I suspect, this is not a kind of situation that is exclusive to the intelligence services. This notion of kind of being boxed in by two physically larger men who are going to tell you what it is that you've done wrong and how badly you've done it wrong.
Yeah.
I thought, great performances, very skillfully well-written character, which is, a ludicrous thing to say when it kind of hasn't been written. It's just been transcribed.
I think that's a real difference maker in this film, though, is the acting. I mean, this is a really well-directed film. Those characters felt very real to me. I think when you're dealing with a small cast like that, with a theater background, they were probably rehearsing long passages. It's not like filmmaking where you're going in and maybe you've got 3 or 4 lines to deliver in a scene. It really felt worked and it felt directed, and I think that was a real strength in the film.
It does try and sort of acknowledge its source material, not just by, telling you that this is a film based on real interviews, but it kind of it deals with this weird thing that you see in official documents from the intelligence services where passages are redacted.
Yeah,
it's clearly tried to do it in a cinematic way. So when the words are deleted from the page, the characters are deleted from the screen. So they just sort of snap out and then snap back in again when the dialogue is crossed out. And I wondered whether that was one of those ideas that seemed, very clever and witty at the time. I did come away feeling slightly like it took me out of the experience, though. It seemed a bit kind of self-conscious and a little bit clever, and it kept reminding me that I was watching a movie.
Yeah. Well, what I liked was that there was variation in it. I think at first there's pixelation, so you're losing part of the story, which is just a great touch because that's kind of what happens in the whole process of redaction and government secrets and all that. And then eventually, the characters disappear entirely. There's a little bit more variation in the sense that sometimes you're hearing the dialogue as it's sort of being typed out in the original transcript, and then that gets blacked out, that gets redacted that way. But you're sort of redacting characters as well. But then eventually, I think it's sort of to preserve the secrecy of what happened, what she did, because we really don't know for quite a while. And then eventually we start to hear more and more. It's kind of, I think it's contemporaneous to the confession when she finally sort of starts to tell the truth, or it's sort of really just dragged out of her. Then there's less censorship, I guess. So you start to see you see her say exactly what happened, and she starts naming the election rigging and how Trump was involved and that sort of thing. So that comes out bit by bit. So again, it's one of these like theater tricks of just dripping the information bit by bit and starting to show more and more by the end of the film. So I didn't mind it. I mean, I think you are limited automatically when you say, okay, we're just going to use this transcript as the script essentially, and you don't have a lot of spaces. There's not a lot of like open images of just, landscapes, we never even see the whole house really. So it's not a cinematic film in that way. So I think they were using tricks, and I thought really well. And that was one of them that I think worked just to make it a bit more cinematic.
Yep. Yeah.
And, I think there's a lot of some of the things that jarred me, which were obviously efforts at cinema, were some of the clever little cutaways to things that she was seeing. She's going through this intense interrogation, but at one time she sees like a toy truck on a sidewalk, and it's got has a Confederate flag on the side. And then there's her cat is on her mind because the cat is kind of loose, and some of the guys are freaked out by cats, and then someone has to leash up the cat. And then later on she sees her cat, or a cat, I think it's a neighborhood cat, in that same little toy truck.
Yeah.
In the back. There's a scene where the snail is sort of crossing this window pane very, very slowly. And they're all just sort of these little cutaways, I think, to get into her psychology in this intense moment. And you just get these little breaks because it's pretty intense. It's an interrogation that goes probably 50, 60 minutes of the film is really focused on this interrogation, at least. So there are very few moments of release. And in fact, you're inside for the longest time, and then you finally come outside, and it's sort of this freedom moment for everybody, I think, for the viewer and for reality. But then she just gets handcuffed more or less right then and there and arrested. Yeah. So it's a very brief freedom. So I think those moments sort of capture that element of her psychology during the interrogation as well. So I thought those were nice little, really bits of visual storytelling. But in total, I'd put less than a screen minute of time, I would think, right?
Yeah, probably. There's one other kind of cinematic or camera technique that they use, which I thought was very, very effective, where she kind of gets tunnel vision.
Yeah.
When the game is finally up, it's like that kind of final heart sink moment. Oh my God, this is actually happening.
Yep.
And it's just like the edges of the screen go a little bit blurry.
Yeah.
And and it's a little bit subtle. It's not in your face.
Yeah.
But it's, I thought, a very effective visual portrayal of this, this kind of sense of the walls closing in and, and kind of just being on the edge of panic.
Yep.
Really successful, actually. I thought that really worked.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I kept thinking was, this shouldn't work. This shouldn't work. It's a play. There's no movement. There's no sweeping camera stuff. We're in one really just very basic apartment. They didn't construct a set as far as I could tell. They were using what was available to them. It shouldn't work. It's all talky. It's only 3 characters. There's no love interest or anything like that. I just kept thinking, why does this work? And why does this work so well when it's got everything working against it? And that's one of the connections I have to the Condor film. But it doesn't seem like it should work. There's a lot of like telling, not showing, which is the exact opposite of what we talk about in film. But you do talk about that in theater, and it works. I was really, really impressed. It was not when I learned what the film was going to be about, in the first few minutes I was really uneasy, and I thought, how long is this? And then I got into it. And I thought so much of it was just about the interrogation and these guys just needling her and giving her, like, again and again, the permission structure to confess. They keep saying, it was a mistake, wasn't it? You still don't know what it was that she did. Oh, it was a mistake. We think it was a mistake. And I guess it's expertly done. It's sinister as hell. But I mean, these guys know that they can get a confession out of her if they sort of empathize with her at first and then sort of give her permission to give them more and more information. And, I think she was given the opportunity to get a lawyer in there or to remain silent or whatnot. But they sort of get her to forego that because they're kind of nice guys. They're doing the nice guy thing. Small talk about their animals or their dogs or what they do for activities or what they bench press and, what workout they do or whatnot. They identify with her, and that gives her the permission to confess. And it's definitely manipulative. But again, it makes for great theater or great cinema, I think.
And there was a voice in my head almost all the way through the film saying, just shut up and get a lawyer. Shut up, get a lawyer. Phone a lawyer.
Yeah. But she does she says this one thing, at the very end, she just wants this stuff to be public. Why can't it be public? I think she says at one point. And I think that's probably why she doesn't think of it as a big deal and he didn't get a lawyer. The American people should know about this. I think that was her, conclusion. So in that sense, I don't think she cared if she got arrested or anything. Yeah.
It's very interesting. If you use some verbatim theatre, you just take somebody else's words spoken by the actual people and just film them. It's very interesting how much editorializing you can actually get away with, because there is quite a bit of editorializing in the film. At least I think the film definitely feels like it has an opinion. I was watching the film, and I came away thinking that the film was trying to make me feel like reality was hard done by, that she was, a warrior for truth, and she shouldn't be, she shouldn't be going to jail for this. But then I got to the end of the film, I thought, you know what? I think, you probably should go to jail for this kind of thing. I'm not a great fan of incarceration, but if there's a chance that what you have leaked may end up exposing sources or witnesses or putting people in danger, then perhaps there is a reason why some of this stuff is kept secret. And when you sign the document, you agree to obey the rules, and if you don't obey the rules, you probably deserve to be punished. I was actually kind of expecting her at the end of the film to be put away for 50 years.
Oh, no.
So it was kind of surprising when it turned out she got 5 years. And I think apparently this is the longest sentence ever awarded for this particular crime.
Yeah, exactly.
And yet, kind of weirdly, I ended up leaving the film thinking, oh, she got away with a lot there, only 5 years in prison. I would have put her away for 50. Yeah. But again, I don't know whether it looks very different on the other side of the Atlantic.
Huh. Well, I think fairly popular opinion here was that she was hard done by on the sentencing. That sure, she deserved some punishment, but a couple of things happened. Like the Intercept, who released her whistleblowing, I guess, and kind of just identified her. They sort of did her no good service by being so bad with the information and disseminating it immediately without really thinking of the consequences. So I think there was some sympathy around that, and a lot of progressives here definitely identify with the Intercept and appreciate their work, but that was sloppy. And then for her to get the longest sentence in history felt a little unjust as well. So I think there's a lot of sympathy for her. 5 years, probably about maybe 2 years too long. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how these sentences go, but seemed pretty harsh for what she did, which was just kind of taking out one bit of documents and sharing them with an organization that really kind of unintentionally got her into more trouble than she might have gotten into. So
I agree. Yeah, the Intercept come out looking like at least as much of a villain from this film as the FBI agents, because absolutely, this is not good journalism.
No, they
to kind of hand over your leak to the FBI immediately. And I think apparently it was something like it was the inkjet printer dots.
Oh, really?
That kind of made it extremely traceable.
Oh,
so
God, yeah.
I think it's just sloppy. So I agree. Journalists need to protect their sources for a reason.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you are a translator for the NSA or the CIA or whoever, well then probably protocol about leaking documents maybe isn't at the forefront of your mind. Yeah. Whereas if you are a journalist for the Intercept, the appropriate protocol to follow when you're given a leaked document should be written in big block letters above every desk. So, maybe they actually are the biggest villains of the piece. They really dropped the ball.
Yeah.
Speaking of dropping balls, I'm going to drop it. Now, after last week's controversy, I'm not entirely sure what coin it is that you drop when you phone the police. I still don't understand whether it's a nickel or a quarter or a dime, or maybe it's $1 now. Can you get $1 in a coin? Is that such a thing?
It's a bit quarter, or a Bitcoin.
A bit quarter.
Yeah. No, it's a quarter.
Right. So this is something that's different to Bitcoin, yes?
Well, yes. I don't know. I don't know about Bitcoin. Does Bitcoin really exist? I can't grab it and use it for a phone call. I don't.
Yeah, can we phone the Cliche Squad with Bitcoin? let's try it. I'm going to either way. I hate to do this, but I am going to phone the Cliche Squad this week nonetheless because I enjoy the music.
Okay.
Cliche Squad.
I think this is a successful film. It accomplishes a lot with a little. So I'm going to suggest that the Cliche Squad just offer a caution.
Okay.
Perhaps they should let the film off with a warning.
Nice.
I only have one accusation, which is the use of animals in cages as a metaphor. I do feel like I've seen that kind of too many times. It's a pretty easy metaphor to do.
Yeah.
I think the most recent one that comes to mind is the Netflix drama Ozark, which I think kind of used this fairly heavily. But I feel like I've seen it a lot.
Oh yeah,
it's
sure.
fine, it works.
Yeah.
But I think we've seen this kind of image often enough that it is kind of a cliche, and I think there should be a little bit of finger wagging from the Cliche Squad on this one. But when it's kind of not necessary, I think, for the power of the film.
Do you have a different opinion at all, knowing that it's from the transcript and that she was letting her dog out and putting it in a pen? I mean, does that make it feel more real or more valid somehow?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I don't think the transcript. See, I told you I'd flip backwards and forwards. The transcript probably contained details about the cat wearing a leash as it sits in the bedroom. I mean, so I don't know. I think they've made an artistic choice here to go with it, and maybe it gets more emphasis than it deserves. I mean, I think the rest of the material is so good. This ends up feeling like a slightly heavy-handed image to me, but this is nitpicking. I feel bad bringing it up.
Well, the snail image is the opposite for me, and that's actually more problematic for me because I just couldn't believe that there'd be a snail in the window. But I love that image, and that's freedom. That's sort of expressing some sort of slow, disappearing freedom. That seems so much more unlikely to have a snail in the window than a dog in a pen. So, I don't know. I think it's kind of canceled out here by the fact that it is reality. Ooh, that's the name of the film.
When I first heard that the name of the woman involved is Reality Winner, it seems so utterly implausible, doesn't it?
Nope, but that's her name.
She sounds like somebody from a spoof about life in 2030.
Yeah.
Not a real person that real things happen to. But then we don't generally get to choose our names.
No.
She's stuck with it. Okay. Overall, I thought this was great.
Great film,
I really enjoyed it. A lot to enjoy and a lot to learn, I think, about the process of turning pre-existing material into a riveting script.
Yeah. I highly recommend it. It's on something called Max. I don't know what that is, but Max, you can find it there.
Yeah, but it's sugar-free. Let's have a break, and then we'll come back and talk about more spy stuff when we have a chat about 3 days of the Condor. So see you in a minute. We're delighted to announce our new augmented reality headset, the TRCC Vision Duo. Kiss the outside world goodbye, and instead don your headset and embrace the warm, brain-nourishing electronic nipple of virtual reality for the low, low price of $3,499. Using our new headset, you can immerse yourself deeply in any film of your choice through the medium of the Two Reel Cinema Club.
Ooh.
It's 2 eyes, 2 movies. Look through your right eye to see modern cinema as it is, in crisp, clear, colourful 4K, complete with unmotivated action, lengthy exposition, poor characterisation, unearned climaxes and strange leaps of storytelling logic. Or look through your left eye to see a thematically linked, much older film, possibly in black and white, made on a low budget, perhaps shot in French or Portuguese, originally released in the 1960s, or the 1980s, or the 1990s. Your left eye appears to inhabit an incredible virtual movie theatre, giving you the convincing illusion that you're watching that scratchy old film on a tiny portable television balanced precariously on a beer crate while your older brother shouts up the stairs that dinner is ready and you have to take out the trash. Because films were just better back then. It's been proven with science. The Two Reel Cinema Club Vision Duo. Blot out the real world for just $3,499.
Nice. That would fudge my brain up pretty bad, though. Because I'm watching the 2 films at the same time. Or can I go
2 films at the same time.
Oh my god. Okay, welcome back. I'll have to try that headset some other time because I did watch 2 movies this time around, but I couldn't watch them simultaneously.
Left eye, right eye.
That's it. Oh, God. That's a lot of brain processing. Too much processing power for my brain. The other film we watched this week was 3 Days of the Condor.
Yeah.
Classic, absolutely classic 70s cinema. And I think at this point I'm supposed to ask you, why?
Why?
Why did you choose this one with reality?
Do you have any other questions for me, Counsel?
Yeah, so I remember watching this film at the BFI South Bank, as it was.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like was it when it was the National Film Theatre back then? It's become the BFI South Bank now.
Yep.
But this is like the big repertoire of cinema on the river in London, and it was kind of part of some season of like films about paranoia and suspicion. I think.
Yep.
And the thing that really stuck with me is just the opening 15 minutes. It's got this great, opening first act that sets up the characters and the peril, really clearly. It really sticks with you.
Yeah.
So when I knew we were going to watch Reality, this film just, came back to me, and I remembered thinking, I bet these would go together. Having watched it again, for the first time in 15 years this week. Yeah, thank goodness they do pair up. Actually, don't they? They have a lot in common. So that's a bit of luck.
Well done. Well done. I loved it. I thought it was a great pair, and I loved it when I saw the name of just one producer come on screen in the credits. I watched this on DVD. It was a well-loved DVD. There were a couple of times where I had to go back and when you fall off the bike, you keep riding, you lose the bike, you never forget how to ride, correct? I was using I had to use the remote very, very carefully because there were some places that sort of glitched out, and then you have to go forward one chapter and then come back to 2 or 3 seconds right after where the glitch was. So there were a couple of times where I felt old school 90s, just working the DVD player with a very skillful thumb. But this film has proper movie stars. It says Dino De Laurentiis. That's the first name you see on the screen.
Yeah.
And it's not like today you get 17 producers and then a bunch of executive producers. This is Dino's film. And it's with proper movie stars. Robert Redford, Faye Dunaway, Cliff Robertson, Max von Sydow.
Yeah.
And I intentionally didn't look at the name of the director at first because I knew that it could only be one of about 4 or 5 people. So I was thinking, okay, this is a 70s political film. It's got to either be Alan Bakula, maybe George Roy Hill, because he worked with Redford so many times, Sidney Lumet, or in fact, Sidney Pollack. And it's just, It's got the look, the feel, the style of just a handful of directors in the 70s. It couldn't be a Spielberg, for example. It couldn't be a Scorsese or anything like that. So it was good to see that Sidney Pollack was at the helm, of course. Just so 70s music, so 70s in New York City in particular. It takes place a bit in Washington, D.C. as well.
That kind of funky jazz theme at the start is begging to be sampled by some kind of hip-hop record, isn't it? I mean, it's absolutely fantastic.
Sooner than later, yeah. So this is based on 6 Days of the Condor. And then I realized, we're missing something here. It looks like 3 days just disappeared between book and film. And it does take place over the course of about 48 hours. So it does spread out over maybe a weekend. I was feeling Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning or something like that. So 3 days of the Condor or something like that. But definitely a compressed timeline. And then is this where we do the hi-hat thing where we go tsk, and you get that?
Let's like I've got the hi-hat right here.
Perfect.
Are you ready?
Yes,
ready?
Please. Yes, please.
Here it comes.
Nice. That's the way a film should come in. First thing I thought about with this film is this is a film that has respect for toupees. and I think toupees have a bad rap. I think a lot of men are trying to own the baldness and all that. But this goes back to a day and age where toupees were pretty common. They weren't very attractive. They weren't very realistic looking, but people had them.
Yeah.
And you hide them under hats, too. So we'll talk about the toupees maybe later. But Robert Redford, of course, is the leading man. He plays Turner, who works at this American Literary Historical Society. It's just a group of readers who are scanning everything in print for, I guess, suspicious communications or something like that. But they've got all these machines in the office. It's sort of like a Victorian house or mansion in New York City somewhere, and there are ticker tape machines going on, printing everywhere. So it's obviously it's not just a bunch of people sitting around reading books together. It's a CIA front of some sort. It's Turner's turn to pick up lunch. But when he comes back to the office, wow, everyone's basically been wiped out by a hit squad. And I love this image of one of the bosses who's fallen dead on the stairwell, but you can see his toupee falling off his head. It was just a wonderful touch. But I loved it. It really captured the era. But Turner, he loses a love interest who is working there with him. And we had seen Max von Sydow creeping around outside, and he seems to be the man who organized this hit squad to go in and take out everyone who seemed like very innocent people working at the mansion. Should we do a spoiler bell or something like that? Because I'm going to go.
I think we should.
Detail.
There's enough plot in here to be worth spoiling. Let's ring the spoiler bell. Here we go. Wait a second. I've got it right here. I haven't moved it since the first half.
Please.
You ready?
Yes, please.
Okay. Stand away from. I'll take your headphones off for a second. Just take them off. You ready?
Done.
Oh, why did I take my headphones off? I should have left them on. Actually, that was stupid of me. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Right. Spoiler bell is sung.
You said first 15 minutes. I think it's like the first 30 minutes of this movie move just beautifully. There's the body count is a little high for my tastes, but it just sort of shows you the sinister power of the people who are going to be exploring and revealing and all these CIA operations. Turns out that Turner has a code name. He's the Condor, so he calls in to try and get picked up, I guess, or taken back in. He's out there on his own. He's scared. And there's this sort of this machination of who's going to bring him in. Is it the Washington office or the New York office? So in the meantime, he does what anyone else would do. He kidnaps Faye Dunaway in like a sporting goods store. He's got her at gunpoint. He needs a place to hang out, basically. He's been at the Guggenheim Museum earlier just trying to waste time, and now he decides he's going to get himself into her Brooklyn apartment using
I wonder how you're going to finish that sentence.
Gun.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's trying to figure out what's happening. Why are all his colleagues dead? Who's behind this and who's hunting him right now? So that's hence the 3 days of the Condor. He's out there on his own. It seems like some part of the agency is trying to get him in safely, and some part of the agency is trying to make sure he's silenced forever. There's this wonderful moment that reminded me of It's a Wonderful Life. I know this sounds kind of strange, but there's this moment where Faye Dunaway and Robert Redford are listening to, I think she's talking to her boyfriend. She has a boyfriend elsewhere. She was supposed to go skiing, but when you get kidnapped by Robert Redford, you cancel the ski trip. And the two characters are leaning in, and they're eavesdropping, and there's all this subtextual chemistry already, but they're on this landline, cheek to cheek, and you just know that sex is going to happen. You can't do that with the speakerphone setting on your cell phone these days. You don't get moments like that, but in the 40s cinema and the 70s cinema you do. Their relationship is a little problematic because it's basically he's kidnapping her and sequestering her in her apartment, but she's sort of fallen in love with him. There's a bit of handsy foreplay, and then Jimmy, you heard it too. The sexy jazz tells us that it's that requisite sexy time, and Kathleen's. It's this bizarre scene where her lonely black and white photos are intercut with her intercourse with the Condor, and she's
but like all the photographs seem to be of kind of like of thin objects pointing upwards.
Oh, is that
as
right?
far as I can recall, it's like not super subtle symbolism.
Yeah, well, and she looks surprised that just as surprised as the viewers are, wondering why this is happening. It just doesn't make sense that they would fall in love. But that's I think one of the weaker parts of this film is that they have to paste that in there as opposed to just the kidnapping. I think would have been more than enough.
I mean, you can kind of shrug and say, well, this was the 70s.
Yeah.
Kidnapping a woman at gunpoint was a reasonable, romantic bid back then. I mean, it said what it really reminded me was it's the plot point from the 49 Steps, isn't it? Basically, it's.
I think you added 10 steps.
You kind of sort of kidnap this woman and keep her close to you as your kind of alibi and your protection, and then they end up falling in love. But they just about get away with it in the 49 Steps, but.
I saw that film when it was called The 39 Steps. Now, are you talking about a sequel?
Oh, is it 39 steps?
Someone's going to
Maybe they added, do you think they added 10 steps for the European market? Something to do with metric system?
They may have. We'll have to look at that.
I'm going to have to look that up now.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Oh, that's terrible. It's a certain number. At least I got the second digit right.
You can imagine that Faye Dunaway's character, Kathy, would think this guy's insane. He's talking about CIA people trying to track him down and kill him. But at morning coffee, after their romance has been sort of consummated, sure enough, Von Zito's character, Joubert, sends in this misfiring postman to kill them. There's some violence there, and it's sort of proven that she should be believing Condor. And he manages to sort of sleuth his way towards truth. He kidnaps Cliff Robertson. There are a couple of kidnappings in here. Cliff Robertson has a toupee. It's not very hard to detect, but again, it's just, I'd love seeing the toupees. He exposes a CIA network within the CIA trying to execute him. So he's discovering that it's in fact CIA who's trying to eliminate him, and that they are up to some no good. Joubert is a major character, so that's the Max von Sydow character, because he's sort of this professional assassin. He has a quaint and harmless hobby, as most professional assassins do. He paints these little model soldiers, so he's kind of tells you he's a reasonable guy. And Condor is putting together the whole story. And I think this is the 1970s. Oil is just under the story's surface the whole time, and he has apparently sort of discovered that there's a connection between Middle East oil countries and Spanish-speaking countries. I think they're trying to hint at Venezuela, and they have some interests that compete with American interests, and that's why the CIA is involved. But he does seek revenge. Condor wants to seek revenge because there's one CIA overlord named Atwood who has ordered the hit that killed his friends, his girlfriend, his coworkers, and nearly him. So he tracks him down to his house, and this is the sort of the one of the climactic moments, I suppose. Von Sydow, who they've been talking about as the Alsatian gentleman, interrupts just when Redford's going to do something. Maybe kill this Atwood character, maybe not, but it's Sundance himself. Robert Redford thinks he's about to get gunned down by the Alsatian, but then Von Sydow, I hope this looked good on your version as well, he fires a clean enough headshot to make it look as if Atwood killed himself, but it's so clean. There's no blood. There's no gray matter. And the actor playing Atwood is still sort of blinking and nodding a few moments after the bullet's gone straight through his head. So Max von Sydow, just the best. Good casting there.
I think these toupees are obviously a lot tougher than you realise. I think that bullet just bounced straight off the fibres, didn't it?
I wasn't sure if that actor was wearing a toupee. There were a lot of toupees, but I'm not sure about that one. And then there's the toupee pork pie hat combo, which seems to really hide the balding very well. There's sort of a tag scene where Redford, Turner's character, Redford playing Turner, calls out Cliff Robertson, but he doesn't call him out on the toupee, which is showing respect. And he just can't help can't help but take the article to what he's written up some sort of story or outed the whole operation, that there's a CIA group that was interested in the Arab oil and they're willing to kill their own in order to make it possible to extract or whatnot. So he goes to the New York Times, and Cliff Robertson's deeply upset by that. And they have a little back and forth over truth. And then Redford sort of disappears into the streets of New York, but you never know if he's going to survive that or not. He's not safe.
Well, as far as I can tell, at the end of the movie, Robert Redford joins the Salvation Army, because that's what he does. He goes stands next to some Salvation Army people, and then we just fade out. And I assumed that's what he went. That was going to be his long-term cover story.
Well, they got the Salvation Army to do their dirty work and kill him right there. That might have been his death shot right there. No blood, no gray matter.
Look out for that tuba.
Yeah. So, as always, I got a little wrapped up in the story and the time, but I was really excited to see this because this is a film I'd seen a number of times back as early as maybe when I was 10 or 12 years old. Because it was probably already on TV by the late 70s. So I had seen it many times. I always like it. It definitely feels 70s. It's stuck. That love scene just feels so strange in the middle of it, but it's Faye Dunaway and Robert Redford, so you've got to put that on screen in that day and age, I guess. But and the music, it just brought me back. I love seeing it every time, and it is really tense. And those first 30 minutes are dynamic, and then Max von Sydow is just scary, but not, and it's just a really complicated and wonderful character as well. So it's classic 70s cinema.
It's fantastically well structured. I did check my watch a few times just for the point of view of, checking some figures for the pod. So like the big murder happens pretty much exactly 15 minutes in.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's very tightly structured.
Yeah.
Everything kicks off then. Faye Dunaway is kidnapped at 35 minutes in.
Yep.
If we assume that where they make love, that's like the midpoint, that's like 1 hour, 7 minutes in. And then like the turning the tables scene, where Robert Redford kind of comes up with this plan and then he kind of puts all his pieces in place. That starts at about 1 hour 30 and it's just under 2 hours, the whole film. It's like it's shaped just right.
Beautifully, yeah.
It's very kind of very closely well structured. But you've seen the film more than I have, I think, then. So I've only ever seen it twice. So I've got to ask you, you have more experience than I do. Does the plot really quite make sense or not?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. One of my last notes here is it's CIA stuff, and it's like appropriately convoluted. So it captures the nature of the spy agencies, but it's also convoluted just enough to make the story ununderstandable enough to make the viewer go on trying to understand it. What doesn't make sense is the whole reader thing, and that he would somehow, by reading, I mean, it seems like they're reading everything, newspapers, poetry, books, they're just reading all sorts of stuff. It makes no sense that he would come up with some notion that the Arab countries were in cahoots with, looked like specifically Venezuela, maybe Spain was involved too, in manipulating the oil market or something like that. And if that were true, I mean, I know this is espionage and you're not supposed to say anything directly, but he stumbles onto the oil thing really late in the game, it seems like. So no, it doesn't make sense and it doesn't matter one bit. We're not supposed to know. I think that's the allure of it.
I was a little bit confused by some of the kind of story logic because we know that Max von Sydow is out to kill Robert Redford all the way through the film, and he even says, I'll kill him for free because he's a loose end.
Yeah,
and yet then they spend a good few minutes together, completely alone in a lift. When Max von Sydow could easily have just bumped him off,
absolutely,
and yet somehow he doesn't.
Yeah.
And then right at the end of the movie, when Redford turns the tables and he turns up at the house of the man who arranged the hit, and just before he's about to do whatever it is he plans to do, Max von Sydow turns up again, and Robert Redford had no idea that he was going to be there, and actually it looks like it's all the whole game is up.
Yeah.
But luckily, off screen. Before the scenes happened, Max von Sydow has already changed sides, and he switched over, and now he's on Robert Redford's side all of a sudden. It feels like, well, that's a bit blooming lucky, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lady Luck smiled on you today, otherwise you'd be a goner.
Yeah.
So this idea that Robert Redford is this kind of super mastermind who outsmarts everybody else doesn't quite kind of add up.
It doesn't add up, no.
I think the plot clips along fast enough that, what, it's fine. I was entertained. And most of these questions I only really came up with after the film was over.
Yeah, and each of those moments are inserted for tension purposes, I think, almost exclusively. So you do worry about the character. The whole idea is that you're worrying about this character. And then he starts to outsmart. You're right. All of a sudden, he's a great telephone mechanic, and he can get information. Well, he's a researcher, so he gets all this information he needs. I think he uses a phone book at one point. Oh my God, there's a big phone book in there at one point. So it's you're seeing his great sleuthing skills, even though he's just a reader. He keeps saying, "I just read books," when in fact, that's one of the messages. And I do want to talk about this quickly before we get too crazy. I think reading is bad for you.
Wait a second, you're a teacher. You're not allowed to say that.
Yeah, James, you're the one who always reads books before the pod and all that. And I just want you to stop that because everyone here at Too Real loves you. We don't want you killed by spies. And the message from this film is don't be a reader.
I love this notion. I just read books because that's one of the lines that I wrote down in my notebook.
Yeah,
where he barks into the phone. Robert Redford says, "I'm not a field agent. I just read books," and that is like a really nice, memorable line. The script has got a lot of great lines in it. So it's Lorenzo Semple Jr. He wrote like Batman, the 1966 TV series.
I love that show. Yeah.
And then Papillon, the Parallax View, the 1976 King Kong movie, which is also De Laurentiis, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
A lot of good fun scripts, and then he wrote it with David Rayfield, who wrote Round Midnight, then The Firm, that Tom Hanks film, The Interpreter. So these guys have got proper screenwriting chops, and like some of the lines that I wrote down in my book, where Faye Dunaway says, "What are you scared for? You've got the gun," she says. Mm-hmm. And Robert Redford tells his boss at work, "I trust a few people, and it's a problem." Mm-hmm. You know, these are lovely, very memorable, sweet little lines that just stay in the brain. There's this line where I think Robert Redford tells one of his spy bosses, "You think not getting caught in a lie is the same as telling the truth." Yep. And I read an interview with Sidney Pollack. Pollack. Is it Pollack or Pollack?
I've always said Pollack.
Sidney Pollack. Yeah, that sounds about right, doesn't it? Yeah. Like the fish.
Yeah.
And Sidney Pollack says he liked that line so much that he recycled it in 2 other films that he directed.
Yeah, I think he says that Higgins at the end, the Cliff Robertson character.
That's it. Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, there is a lot of great dialogue writing in this film. Lots of lovely, pithy, memorable little lines. And the other thing I really, really enjoyed is the way that it kind of fetishizes the equipment of spycraft. Yeah. I just love those chunky phones and those, big computers with big clunky switches and tapes.
And tape.
And like at the beginning of the movie, there's like the machine that turns the pages of books and reads them automatically. I love all that stuff. It just looks so great. Yep. And the scene where Robert Redford is using this kind of little handheld phone that he plugs into the phone exchange. Yeah. All that sort of equipment. Yeah. It's just a great load of fun. It's part of the enjoyment of the movie.
Yeah. But similar to reality, there are times when I think, why is this film succeeding? Because you're right, the structure is really, really tight, but there are these deep, deep holes, and we don't really understand it. That doesn't really matter, and the romance is so pasted in there. There are a number of things that make it, you feel like it shouldn't work. And you have the fact that Max von Sydow overlooks a couple of great opportunities to kill Robert Redford and doesn't take them. It's not very believable. I mean, I think reality is being super believable, but this one also, I think there's some problems to it, but it still succeeds. And I think in part because it's just, a fantastic cast, a fantastic director, a fantastic script. Dino De Laurentiis. Oh my God. And one thing that I had these Chinatown vibes watching this film, and it's in part because of Faye Dunaway, and the intrigues and the twists. And she just brings this. For Faye Dunaway, I think she's sort of underwritten and mishandled. She just brings this calm, elegant, wild card element to films, I think. But the whole thing about tying her up, kidnapping her, I mean, I guess the protagonist has to do what the protagonist has to do, but she doesn't get a lot of lines. She doesn't get a lot of real action. She kind of gets into the spy game a little bit and helps him out when she realizes, he's telling the truth. But especially early on, she's really given very little. She's just sort of this one-dimensional table scrap of a character, but she's vulnerable, right? And she had to be vulnerable and manipulated. You could probably almost make her a Cliche Squad. And it just feels like there's supposed to be a love interest in the story. So I'd be interested if that's in the book or...
I wonder,
if that went into the script. But the thing about it is she manages to make it a good part, and she's great. Despite all that. There are a number of things that led me to believe, why is this a good film? And it hasn't aged beautifully. There are definitely some clunky things. But it like reality, I think it succeeds despite itself somehow.
I wonder whether it largely demonstrates that you can get away with an awful lot when you have the charm of Robert Redford to ride on.
Yeah, definitely.
And he's a tremendously charming, proper film star with a capital F and a capital S.
Absolutely fantastic.
It's very quintessentially 70s, isn't it?
Yeah,
this film
definitely
it has all this kind of 70s theme about kind of. And I told you that I saw it as part of a season of films about paranoia. It's paranoia and it's the distrust of authority, and it's a kind of post Watergate.
It's definitely post
world, isn't it?
Yep.
I think this film was it made after or before All the President's Men? I don't know.
Oh, that's a good question. I think before. I think we need...
Right, okay, yeah, it may well be. I wonder whether All the President's Men was actually 76.
Is that what you're saying?
But it's still... but it's it has that kind of flavour, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So it kind of it fits in very tightly with that kind of 1970s
Yeah,
vibe.
and I think just the distrust of the government, what we'd seen happen here, the oil shortages, and potential violence around oil and resources, all that's out there. Obviously, the music and everything else we talked about, but very quintessentially 70s. I think for me, there's also, although I just told you to stop reading, there's this sort of powerful case for journalism of that era, right? Like he goes to the New York Times. That's who you can trust is the newspaper industry or journalists. And to go back to the reading quickly, there's this one moment where a nurse, and maybe you can back me up on this. I don't think she would do this, but there's a nurse in like an ICU ward where where Wicks, one of Condor's bosses, is sort of lying almost dead, and she picks up a magazine and starts reading, and that's right the moment where you get this idea that, oh, Joubert just pulled this guy off life support in the other room because she was reading.
It was like it was a paperback book. I couldn't tell you what it was that she was reading, but these days that would kind of be frowned on. I think
do you
she
have
was
time
having a
to
break.
do that?
It's like, go to the break room, read your paperback book. Don't do it like actually at work. She's virtually at the bedside reading a book, isn't she? I mean,
if you're in an ICU,
that would be frowned on.
I don't think you have time to pick up a book and read if you're in ICU nervous. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God!
But there's definitely I think journalism is the trusted element of society there.
I mean, it's something I think we'll come back to when we talk about the synthesis, but it's fascinating that going to the press is what saves Robert Redford's bacon.
Yeah.
In this film, whereas going to the press is what lands Reality Winner in jail.
Yeah.
It's two completely different outcomes. Well, before I want to kind of bring the two films together because they do kind of go together really well. But before we do that, let's play my favorite game. You have to humor me. Let's play Who Am I?
Who am I?
So, and once again, I say this every week. I'm going to say it again. I can't remember who goes first.
So do
you want to go first?
I didn't even think about this very much this time around, but I'll tell you who I want to be.
Oh yeah,
I want to be Max von Sydow.
Is that because you really like painting those little Warhammer figures?
I hate that sort of stuff. No, and I don't like that kind of detail hobby. But I think that was just a cheap bit of characterization. But I just like von Sydow. I mean, I love the way he cleans up the crime scene at the very end. He knows exactly what Redford has touched, and I just love the fact that he can kill a person and not make the person bleed. I think that's a gift.
That is skill. You're right.
That's a gift.
Absolutely.
But also, I mean, I love the fact he busts out into French here and there. He's Swedish, but he's playing the Alsatian gentleman. And at one point in our family history, we thought that our grandfather's ancestors had come from Alsace-Lorraine. So I've always been sort of entranced by Alsace. So I just love the fact that it was like seeing myself on screen, the Alsatian gentleman. So,
I love this. This is another kind of 1970s notion, which is that Europe is one homogenous mass, isn't it? There's those Europeans,
and they talk about that in the film too, doesn't he? Say, I prefer Europe. I'd go back to Europe, and Redford says, no, I'm from here. How about yourself?
I usually flatter myself with these, who am I things. I'm going to flatter myself again. I think it's more to do with the skill of her portrayal than the real character itself. I did really sympathise with Reality and Reality Winner, insofar as I could feel her conflicted sense of wanting to do the right thing, but not having a good enough grasp of the situation to understand what the right thing to do might be.
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of been my baseline state for most of my life, wanting to do the right thing, but I just don't know what it is. What shall I do? And also, I could really sympathise with that notion of kind of things going wrong and that kind of that sense of the whole world kind of collapsing in on you and getting tunnel vision. That's a feeling I feel very vividly from my history tests when I was at school. And I would know that I should have read the chapter, and I did read the chapter. In fact, I spent 2 hours reading the chapter. I read the chapter 5 times, and yet here I am, trying to answer the questions on the test, and I don't know the answer to any of the questions, and I can't start to get tunnel vision, and the world is collapsing around me, and everything kind of goes out of focus a bit. And yeah, I really, really felt like that. I'm glad to say that I haven't leaked any important CIA documents. I've just flunked history tests, but I feel like the principle is the same.
That you know of.
Well, that's true. You're right. That I know of.
Maybe someone's leaked them under your name. Because you do have an alias, Jimmy Razor. Come on.
Jimmy Razor. All sorts of things that happened under that alias.
Exactly.
Yeah, don't look that alias up on the internet because you get that Canadian serial killer, don't you?
That's right. No.
That really, really wasn't me. I have looked up the 49 steps, and you're right, it was the 39 steps. So I managed to add another 10 steps there.
Yeah.
I always like to make things more difficult than they really are.
Bigger, better.
I added 10 extra steps there. Let's do our synthesis. We'll bring the two films together because I like this overlong jingle that I play now.
Yeah.
And that'll give me enough time to try and think of a reason why these two films belong together. So, and I always say the same thing. I'm going to say it again. These are kind of like two sides of the same coin, or at least they're like two similar coins, but in different pockets of a jacket, something like that. Or one of them is in a purse, and one's in a wallet or something. So like in both of these films, we have a lowly researcher. They work for a US intelligence agency, but really they're just kind of a desk worker. And then they get caught up in uncovering or releasing important secrets, and they suffer the consequences. I must say, watching both of these films, what I was asking myself was, could there possibly be a timelier moment for a film about the mishandling of official documents? Because I feel like I cannot read the news at any point at the moment without reading about how Trump mishandled official documents, but he says that Biden mishandled official documents. But then he had the right to have the documents, and he declassified the documents, but no, he didn't declassify the documents. I feel like this not only is this ripped from the headlines, this feels like these films are both kind of feeding the headlines somehow. This is the right time for these films.
Yeah, it was filmed. Reality was filmed, I think, about this time last year, maybe spring of 2022. So probably before the documents were even found at Mar-a-Lago. So it's actually perfect timing. Got on a Netflix perfectly. But I don't think it could have been that well planned. So I think it's happenstance. It's very serendipitous for the makers of Reality.
It's interesting that from these related setups, basically we get two wildly different playouts, don't we? So in Reality, meaning the film, I'm surprised we haven't ran into that trouble more often. In the movie Reality, the person who does the leaking, they get boxed in and confined, and they're kind of chewed away out further and further and further, and so their world kind of shrinks. Whereas Condor is kind of like the opposite, and Redford becomes, like his world expands, and he ends up being like super competent at everything, and in the end he wins all of the prizes, doesn't he? He kind of, he gets the girl, and he gets his freedom, and he gets one up on authority, and he gets to join the Salvation Army. Everything goes right for him at the end of the film. I ended up kind of feeling, what these films really kind of say? They highlight that it's not so much the crime that's significant, it's the criminal.
Yeah.
Robert Redford leaks to the press, and that's his safety net. Reality leaks to the press, and it's her downfall.
Yeah.
In Condor, it's a man at the center of the trouble, and he shoots his way out, and he outwits people, and he screws his way out of trouble. Whereas in Reality, it's a woman who's at the center of the problem, and you know what? She gets squeezed and squeezed and squeezed until at the end of the movie she can barely breathe.
Yeah.
It's not who's doing the crime. It's not the crime. It's who's doing the crime, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's in both stories this classic idea of like an ordinary person being put into extraordinary circumstances and then sort of rising to the occasion. And that definitely happens with Condor in 3 days. And it's, it sort of happens to Reality in the sense that she's got this, what's considered sort of very banal, sort of low-level job, but she does something quite quite dramatic, quite extraordinary, and then she gets just zeroed in on so quickly that she doesn't have a chance to hit the road and run from the law or anything like that, or move to a different country or anything like that. But she does have to deal with the extraordinary situation. So I think they're definitely playing on that well-worn theme. I think of the ordinary guy getting into trouble.
I got another kind of synthesis of these two films, and tell me whether you agree with this or not, which is I think I started out writing in my notebook these films have very different attitudes to women, but after thinking about it, I don't think that. I think these films have actually very similar attitudes to women, but they have, what I wrote here was they have different opinions of whether those attitudes are right. So like in both the films, the female lead has very little agency. The female lead is pushed around by men. She has to do the bidding of men. Her freedoms are gradually eroded. But in reality, this erosion of the freedom and agency of the woman is at the heart of the film. It's the central theme, and we feel for her and her complex character. Whereas in 3 Days of the Condor, Faye Dunaway's character, has her freedom taken away from her. She's pushed around. She has to do the bidding of men, but she's basically just a plot device, or she's like a prize. Her character, such as it is terribly shortchanged. She's just like a device, isn't she? Yeah. She's basically a device that they can get Robert Redford and Faye Dunaway on the poster having a kiss.
Yeah.
And that's kind of all that she is for. So similar things sort of happen to both women, but 3 Days of the Condor is fine with that. Whereas reality is pointing out this is not such a good idea.
I agree. And then in both films, there's really only one lead female character. There are a couple of maybe two other characters in Condor that get, maybe three other female characters get lines, and they're on the screen for much time at all. So they are the two principal characters in each film. And of course, reality, there really is no other woman in that film. I think until the end, isn't one of the FBI agents who frisks her and sort of takes her away as a woman. But there are not a lot of women in either one.
I think what I took home from these movies back to back, which is basically in the modern world, you know what? You can leak secret documents as long as you're the right person to leak them. Mm-hmm. And if you're not, it's big trouble. Yeah. Make of that what you will. Yeah, definitely. We'll see. Well, it'd be interesting to see how the actual news story with the documents works out. Yeah. I don't know whether that will ever be resolved. I mean, I wonder. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I think these two films would be great to watch right now if you're at all interested in what's happening with former President Trump. These are two great films to watch.
Yeah, somewhere there must be a repertory cinema that could put these two on as double bill and clean up, and people will tell them how clever they are.
Yeah. Oh,
because they got the idea from us.
Yes. Yahoo! Go to Real Cinema Club. You guys rock.
Speaking of repertory cinema, we've got time to talk about also playing at this theatre. So, have you been out this week? Seen anything else?
No, I've been very busy. I have watched one entire. Oh my God, is it HBO? I mean Max. Is it Max?
Or Max?
No.
Max.
It was the one that hasn't changed its name. Netflix. I've
seen
that one.
They'll seem to be renamed Flix or Net. One of those two.
Internet Flix. Netflix. Netflix. I saw the documentary. I think it was maybe 6 parts. It was called Tour de France Unchained, or Tour de France au cœur du peloton in French. It was good. It was just sort of documented the 2022 Tour de France. But that was really well done. They sort of explored the different teams and featured on a lot of the lead riders for each team. And I liked it a lot. I've been doing this forever, but I'm writing a feature script based on a bicycle tour in Europe. So it was very helpful also. It was really informed my writing quite a bit, but it was good. It was very.
But is this like a tour of professional cyclists, or is this like a family out for a jaunt on a holiday?
The Tour de France is professional cyclists. You don't know.
Okay, right. Thanks for
clarifying. Are you talking about my script?
Yeah. Oh, there's a script as well.
Yeah.
What's happening in the script?
It's a professional riders tour. Just one that would be the protagonist is one of the lead writers.
Those guys are tough, aren't they? My God, I feel exhausted just watching it on TV.
Oh my God, tough, but like emaciated, very, very thin. All of them. They don't look healthy, and this tour does not lend any decency to their health. It's just rough. Whew.
Oh, punishing.
Yeah. So.
I watched Eighth Grade this week.
Oh, good, yeah.
Which is, so Bo Burnham picture. Didn't really know anything about him. 2018, with Elsie Fisher, coincidentally also starring, is it Josh Hamilton, who is the lead FBI agent in reality. So I'd never seen that guy before in my life, and now I've seen him twice in a week.
He plays teen fathers a lot. He's on a series here called 13 Reasons I Hate You, I think, is another one.
Okay.
He's always this sort of, is it aloof father? He's not the best father, but he's still kind of young and sort of, he's trying. He's a trying father.
Well, that's exactly what he is in Eighth Grade. Yeah. He is trying father. He's very sweet. I had read that this was, like a great, very believable, honest film about being, about 13, 14. And so I suggested kind of bravely to my children, well, let's watch this. And we all sat down and watched it as a family. And I was kind of thinking, it's good when you're young if you see that other people are also going through the same kind of self-conscious emotional mess that you're going through. Yeah. Not to imply that my children are a self-conscious emotional mess. I'm reminding myself here that this will be a publicly available podcast. But and we were kind of, all enjoying it and kind of cringing away at the same bit. And then, but what I didn't realise was that, about 45 minutes into the film, there is a fairly large subplot about blowjobs.
Oh yes,
and yes, and then I kind of realised, oh no, now not only have I got the embarrassment of watching all these scenes about blowjobs, but far worse than that, my teenage children have to sit and watch several scenes about blowjobs next to their parents.
They will. I don't think you don't have to worry about ever watching a film with them again. I don't think.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. They are never going to take my suggestions for seeing a film ever again. Oh dear. Oh, Dad. So that was good fun, but that is a lovely film actually, with some great performances, and that's terrifically well written. It's a lovely picture.
I think that was on our list to possibly pair with Are You There, God?
Right? Okay. Those two would have paired up well, actually. Yeah, absolutely. So. And then last night we managed to get out of the house to watch Peter Gabriel on tour. Ooh. So he played One London Date, which was last night, and that was good fun. He's not young, he's 73 now. And still able to sort of bob around a bit on stage. And certainly, and he's still got the voice. And it was, enjoyable show. And we had kind of reasonable tickets, but were stood behind some people quite a bit taller than us, so ended up watching the screens rather more than the stage. But it was,
Where was the performance?
This was at the O2, which is what used to be like the Millennium Dome in the far east side of the city. Yeah. Which was originally built as a kind of a temporary structure. It's basically a massive tent, and it was going to be a temporary structure for the Millennium. Yeah. And yet they've managed to keep it going, and it's it's a perfectly acceptable concert venue, and there's like a big mall and restaurants and places to go out and venues and stuff, and it's a fun part of town. It's not a fantastic concert venue, and it's not dripping in character, but it's fine, and it was a good show. So I enjoyed it. Wow. It's fine. I went along expecting it to be a bit of a farewell tour, and actually it was a very forward-looking concert, and he was constantly talking about, it was 60% new material, and he was talking about songs that he is still writing and things that he hopes are going to come to fruition. So it doesn't look like he's slowing down. So no farewell tour. He'll be back again in 5 years. We'll see.
Nice.
Next time then. So we're going to watch a Wes Anderson double bill, which I'm looking forward to. Asteroid City is his new picture with absolutely stellar mega cast. We're going to compare that to his now sophomore picture. Is that the right word? Was that what you would call your second feature?
Well done, sophomore. Yeah.
Oh, I'm getting used to this high school nomenclature now.
I think most Americans wouldn't know that there's a third O in there. So we say sophomore, not sophomore, but you spell it sophomore.
Oh, okay. So this is like me saying Connecticut now, isn't it, or something like that? Is that right?
Please don't do that. Please don't do that.
So sophomore.
Yeah.
It's a sophomore.
Sophomore. Yeah, it's
sophomore. picture. Okay, right. Which is called Rushmore, not Rushmore. It's Rushmore, right? Okay, I'm gonna try very hard to get this right for next time. So we're going to be watching those two. I have 2 weeks to practice. Yeah. Come back and join us next week because we're going to be hanging out at the popcorn counter talking about 1970s Hollywood. I reckon we can get some popcorn chit-chat about that. Yeah. And otherwise, join us in 2 weeks for Wes Anderson plus Wes Anderson. We'll see you then. Okay, thanks for joining us. Until next time.
Goodbye, everyone.
And be careful with those secret documents.
Ooh, and mention Tom Hanks. I forgot to mention Tom Hanks.
Oh my God, Tom Hanks.
That's another thing.
Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks is not in either of those two films. That's what we want to say about the two films.
I think Tom Hanks actually is in Asteroid City. You know?
Oh my God, really? Oh,
yeah, I think so. I think he might be.
So we have reason to mention his name next